equating Facebook or Twitter with the government. It is not a public square.
No, I'm not.
Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying that now we're going to have more free speech or whatever it is he's trying to say. This is not a pendulum swing. If we were actually going to see a pendulum swing in the other direction, they would keep the fact-checking program, ban the liberal news outlets, and only allow conservative outlets to fact-check posts on Facebook.
Today's headlines have been dominated by a media titan with a bold message on free speech and being uncensored. But we begin instead with Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, has unveiled sweeping reforms to the world's biggest social media business, or as I would call it, a screeching 180.
And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
Hey, welcome back, guys. Today we have Mark Zuckerberg, who just dropped a bombshell announcing sweeping changes to Meta's policies. But here's the kicker. This free speech crusader is suddenly buddy-buddy with Donald Trump, even after he just banned him years ago. Is this a genuine pivot or just Zuckerberg doing what Zuckerberg does best, chasing money and power? Let's break it all down and let's see what's really going on behind the scenes.
Well, note that his admission that the re-election of President Trump, a man he once deemed too toxic to even have an account on any of his platforms, was pivotal. Now he's announced a partnership with Trump to push First Amendment rights around the whole world. Zuckerberg took a massive swipe at the, quote, legacy media and the infamous fact-checkers. Well, they've gone.
Hackers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system.
Well, CNN's Brian Stelter said the quiet part out loud when he posted, all in line with the desires of President Trump and Trump voters, out with the fact checkers that conservatives deride, in with more permissive rules for posting conservative opinions. Now, whether you're conservative or not, what exactly is wrong with permitting conservative opinions? The fact is that fact checkers have always been biased, as Zuckerberg now admits, especially when it comes to President Trump. His decision to copy Elon Musk's community notes at a time where Musk is at the heart of the new administration and seemingly the whole of global politics is no accident. I like community notes. I think they're a good thing. Of course, this could all be a cynical ploy to appease the new masters that is just as easily reversed in 4 years' time. But I don't think it is. I think Trump's election is already reshaping our culture in seismic ways. If he gets his way, it might also be reshaping the global map, planting a US flag in Greenland and beside the Panama Canal.
Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
And can you tell us a little bit about what your plan is? Are you going to negotiate a new treaty? Are you going to ask the Canadians to hold a vote? What is the strategy?
Yeah, I can't assure you. You're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two.
Somebody said we should just throw Mexico in there while we're at it. I thought that was pretty funny.
So King Musk, MAGA Meta, and a US invasion of Denmark. Quite a lot to unpack with my panel. I'm joined by the host of the Part of the Problem podcast, Dave Smith, host of the Dean Obeidallah Show, Dean Obeidallah, author and host of Pivot, Kara Swisher, and the Timcar CEO, Tim Pool. So I've got to say, an absolutely stellar lineup to kick off this panel. Kara, I'll be trying to work out just how big your head may have been exploding.
Feels a little loaded, Piers. It feels a little loaded. I guess it's just me. But go ahead.
No. You can more than hold your. I could have 10 men up against you, Kara, and I'd back you every time.
It's true.
But I've been thinking about you because your head must have been exploding, hasn't it, the last week with all that's been going on with some of your favourite people?
No, my head doesn't explode, Piers. No, I. This is what they're like. You know, I don't know if you've read my book or not, but this is what they're like.
I did,
this is exactly the way Mark always was. And he's like, I called him, he's kind of a sad weather vane. He just sort of tips and goes along depending on what's in his self-interest. And this is what he is like. He's always found it irritating that he has to have responsibility for anything or consequences anywhere in the world, and doesn't consider himself a publisher. And so he'll do whatever it takes at whatever time it takes. So I find him disloyal to almost everyone, including back when he threw Trump off the platform.
Exactly. This is Zuckerberg's whole playbook. Adapt or die. Who needs those when you can follow the money instead, right? Whether it's Trump, the First Amendment, or community notes, Zuckerberg's allegiance is to the bottom line, not to the people, only to his money.
I just don't trust him with anything. And in 4 years' time, he'll switch again if it's in his best interests, financial interests, really.
I mean, he wouldn't be the first media titan to go where the power and money wind blows. But on the detail of his statement yesterday, was a pretty extraordinary reversal.
Well,
of
it was
almost...
also it was a little mendacious on a number of things. By the way, there are a lot of conservative fact checkers in that fact checking situation. And many years ago, he talked about how AI was going to solve this. And now it's community notes that's going to solve this. It's a multifaceted problem. And the real issue is the site is built for malevolent players and sometimes governments, sometimes people to do whatever it want on the system. It's a system that's impossible to fact check. It's a system that has no guardrails on it, and it's a system in which he uses the First Amendment when it suits him. I actually don't think he's read it, even though it's short and first. Governments shall make no law. Like, it doesn't say Facebook shall make no law. He makes rules and then he breaks them. And he says, with Alex Jones, he did that with all kinds of things. And then he reverses himself. Holocaust deniers was a good example. He told me in an interview, and we got, I was like, well, he said, Holocaust deniers don't mean to lie. And I said, well, that's kind of the definition of a Holocaust denier. But and then 2 years later, reversed it. And then who knows if he's going to, now he seems to have reversed it again. And so I don't think he has any particular principles or values that are lasting. He can do whatever he wants because he's king of that site.
Well, yeah, to a point, I guess he can. Dave Smith, what did you make of the...
He's king of that site. Piers, he can't be fired ever. His children can't be fired. Let me just be clear. He has total control of that site.
But you're talking to the wrong accent when it comes to kings. We like our kings. We like kings.
I know, you have a better king. I'd rather have Prince Charles running that thing.
We believe in monarchical power. So,
yes.
Dave Smith, I mean, I found it jaw-dropping, to be honest, notwithstanding a lot of what Cara just said, that she wasn't remotely surprised by the wind blowing. But to actually see him, trot down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the Trump ring, as it was put, and to then do really what turned out to be half mea culpa and half screeching U-turn over pretty much everything that Facebook had stood for, was pretty spectacular to watch.
Yeah, it was incredible. And, I want to be clear. I think this is a really positive thing. I don't believe in so like I kind of want to be happy about it, but all of my instincts are just to rip the guy, because especially because he doesn't acknowledge there's no acknowledgement that he did something wrong or that he's changed his mind on this. It's kind of this just vague, like, oh, I created this to give people a voice. And a lot of people think this stuff went too far. And like, yes, it reminds me of, I debated Chris Cuomo last year, and it reminds me of him coming out and saying, like, hey, you guys, this ivermectin stuff isn't horse dewormer, it turns out. It's people medicine. And you're like, yeah, that's what we were all saying at the time, in my world at least, and we got a lot of abuse for that. At one point, I do think it's worth just pointing out what happened over these years, even though I think this is a very positive change. I was just playing on my show the other day a video clip. I'm sure all of you guys have seen it. But Mark Zuckerberg blatantly admitted that both Facebook and the FBI interfered in the 2020 election on the Joe Rogan Experience. And, for all of the news coverage, and to some degree rightfully so, over the last 4 years about January 6th, about some of Trump's claims of the election that him and his lawyers were really never able to demonstrate at all. But how about that admission that the FBI came and told Facebook, be prepared for a Russian dump that's coming soon. And then when the laptop came out, you have 50 plus intelligence officers signing on to this letter saying that this is the Russian disinformation. And he admitted to censoring people for that. This is like blatant election interference by the FBI and one of the biggest tech companies out there. I mean, I would think if you're going to reverse that, it would also come along with like an apology and some admission of what you were a part of. He says he created the site to give people a voice. You robbed your fellow Americans of their voice in a very important, crucial point in American history.
There it is. Facebook and FBI meddling in an election. This is like election interference on steroids. and yet the media downplays it like it's no big deal. If TikTok had done this, the outrage would be deafening. But Zuck just gets a slap on the wrist, and that's it. Everybody moves on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was a New York Post columnist at the time that all went down with their exclusive on Hunter Biden's laptop, which turned out to be a completely genuine story, and certainly wasn't Russian disinformation. And the way that all played out was quite extraordinary and pretty terrifying to see that the New York Post.
Well, although, guys, come on, look, tech companies make mistakes the way publishing companies make.
But that wasn't a mistake, Cara, was it?
I
mean, it wasn't.
Well,
they actually. Hang on.
Hang
on. My point. They actually banned the New York Post X account completely. Completely.
Yes, they did.
If they didn't take down their true story. I mean, that is the most blatant attack on free speech I've ever seen.
It's not free speech. It's not a government institution. Companies do that. Disney didn't put out a movie in China because the Chinese.
It doesn't make it right, though, does it?
Of course not, but it's not, you're equating Facebook. You're equating Facebook or Twitter with the government. It is not a public square.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
To be very clear, I certainly was not. Listen, I was not equating Facebook and the FBI, and I think it is reasonable to point out that a lot of these big tech companies were under duress really since Donald Trump won in 2016. All the heads were hauled in front of Congress and threatened up and down if they didn't get this misinformation problem under control. But is the claim here that those intelligence officers made a mistake and really thought this was Russian disinformation?
Here's what I'm saying,
and
is
then realized it was Hunter Biden's laptop?
Our government should be talking. Go ahead.
Tim, let Cara finish her point, then I'll bring you in, Tim.
The government should constantly be talking to lots of companies because there are disinformation campaigns from Iran, Russia. You can't pretend that China's not all up in our grill. You just can't. You just can't. And there should be discussions between government and companies. They're going to occur. By the way, they've been occurring since the beginning of time, way back when, go watch Oppenheimer. There's discussions happening all the time on all levels between companies. The question is, what is pressure and what is important discussions that these companies, because they are at the nexus of all these information systems, should be having, and what are the guardrails against government overreaching? I am all for stopping government overreach. I did a great interview with Edward Snowden about this issue. Perhaps the way he did it wasn't right, but what the government was doing was wrong. They fixed it. There should be guardrails around these things. The question is how it's done. But what happens is there's a fever dream on the left and a fever dream on the right of what's occurring, and it's a little less nefarious. I think that Facebook, unfortunately, occupies a far too important role in news distribution as a kind of a monopoly. And that's the problem we have going forward. It's a private company that's determining what everybody sees. And they're going to not just make mistakes. We're at the behest of Mark Zuckerberg's obviously incompetent ability to decide what's right and wrong. Or should he, by the way?
Let me bring Tim in. You've been waiting patiently. Tim, your response.
Free speech is a principle. When we say that Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever platform is silencing free speech, we are not talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects multiple rights, of which one of those is free speech. So this constant conflation of a private company isn't violating your First Amendment. I'm not going to bring up the First Amendment. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go on a platform, I'm going to express my ideas and share news. And if they silence me, they are violating my free speech. Now, more importantly, this argument about, you mentioned there's a fever dream on the left and the right. I want to make one thing clear. Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying that now we're going to have more free speech or whatever it is he's trying to say, this is not a pendulum swing. This is not the weather vane. Certainly, I do believe the man is just bending the knee to whatever power structure he sees. But if we were actually going to see a pendulum swing in the other direction, they would keep the fact-checking program, ban the liberal news outlets, and only allow conservative outlets to fact-check posts on Facebook. When you look at all sides, when you look at ground news, the majority of U.S. fact-checkers had a liberal bias, and only one, which was associated with the Daily Caller, was considered to be conservative-leaning. And when numerous outlets on the right made attempts to get access through Pointer to the fact-checking system, they were denied that. So now, once again, what do we see? Real quick, to another point. Back to the First Amendment issue, I just want to add, the government had backdoors into X and Facebook where we actually got to click the link and go to the login portal for the federal government to go into Facebook to flag posts. And there was an instance where if you said the name Eric Charamella on YouTube or Facebook, your post would be inexplicably deleted. And everybody knew that was happening. And this is Real Clear Politics that it broke the reporting on Eric Charamella. So what we're looking at since Elon took over Twitter and turned it into X, We have consistently seen a dominant liberal or Democrat Party bias on these platforms. And when the problem is, quote unquote, resolved, you get neutrality. There's been no circumstance where we have seen a right bias or a conservative bias or a pendulum swing in the other direction. So Mark Zuckerberg right now is declaring neutrality. He's not actually swearing fealty or kissing the pinky ring of Trump.
Exactly. This is the issue. When these platforms promise being neutral, it's a joke. Neutrality isn't silencing one side and then calling it even. If there's been a swing, it's been away from fairness and towards suppressing conservative voices. But now Zuckerberg's playing the neutral hero. Yeah, okay. So there you have it. Zuckerberg's big pivot is more like a spin cycle. Is this about free speech or just about staying relevant in a post-Musk, pro-Trump world? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more contents like this. Thank you.